It was late September when I moved into the cabin. When the aspens turned gold and the air smelled like pine resin and cold earth, I finally found some respite. After 15 years amid constant noise in the city, the sirens, the hum of traffic, or neighbors, it was silence that I craved. This cabin was exactly what I needed. 12 miles from civilization with no visible neighbors, in the quiet of the sky and forest, it settled into your bones with the amount of peace it produced. My first few weeks went exactly as I had dreamed. I fell asleep to the wind nestling through the trees and woke to birdsong, lively chirping in the background. I also learned to identify all the sounds I heard around me, whether it was the rustle of a deer moving through the underbrush, the screech of a red-tailed hawk, or the crack of branches settling in the cold. I sat on the porch with my tea one night, just listening to absolutely nothing. Beautiful, to say the least. Then, the first disturbance. I came across it on a Thursday, mid-October. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to a scraping sound, something near the back of the cabin. It wasn't loud, just persistent, something dragging against the exterior wall. I lay there listening, trying to place it and figure out what it was. But after a few minutes of making the noise, it stopped. I reasoned it must have been a raccoon or some other animal. Maybe a branch swinging in the wind. I went back to sleep, unharmed. But then, it was there again, 2 nights later. The same exact time, the same exact location. This occurrence lasted longer, maybe 5 minutes, and then it stopped abruptly. I got up, checking the back door, just to find it was locked, shining a flashlight through the window. But there was nothing except my own reflection in the darkness beyond. I walked the perimeter in the morning. Nothing. No marks, no fallen branches, no tracks near the wall at all. It was the third week in October by the time it started happening every few nights. It always happens between 1 and 3 a.m., keeping me from a good night's sleep. Sometimes it was scraping, other times a soft thud against the side of the house, and still other times footsteps, or what sounded like footsteps at least, circling from the back of the house to the side. I just waited there, hoping it was nothing, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I listened, I checked, and always nothing. It had to be animals, I told myself. Bears, even, although I had seen no claw marks or scat. Possibly deer bumping into things or branches I couldn't identify in daylight. The woods were full of sounds. Maybe I just didn't understand some of them yet. This had to be normal, right? Just had to be adjusting. But then, the sounds started to change. They started moving closer and closer to the windows. There was one night in particular when I heard something directly outside my bedroom, with a slow, methodical dragging, sounding like fabric against glass. I turned on every light as soon as I could and looked out the window. There was nothing, just my pale face staring back at me in the black forest beyond. I even checked the motion sensor light on the porch, and it hadn't been triggered. The sleeping got worse. I told myself during the day that I was just being ridiculous, letting isolation get the best of me. But it was at nighttime, lying in the dark, that I heard it. Footsteps on gravel, a soft creak on the porch step, or a pause at the front door, waiting. Then one night, in early November, I heard it breathing. It wasn't animal breathing, nor the heavy panting of a dog or the snuffling of wildlife outside. No, this was measured, controlled, like a human. It came from just outside my bedroom window, patient, rhythmic even. I didn't move because I didn't want to believe that my life was somehow in danger. And after what felt like an hour, it stopped just as it had appeared. That's when I found it the next morning, a cigarette butt in the gravel just beneath that window. It was relatively fresh. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been there the whole time. Maybe it was from a previous tenant. But I knew I had raked that area myself about 3 weeks ago, and that butt wasn't weathered either. It had been there recently. The doors, the windows, the crawl space entrance, everything was locked and secure, but small things felt out of place. There was the chair on the porch, which I didn't remember moving, nor the muddy footprints on the back step, which weren't quite my size. The wood pile looked disturbed, with pieces restacked slightly differently from where I left them. Time to call the sheriff's office. The deputy who came out was polite, yet skeptical about what I had shared with him on the phone. He decided to walk the property and check the doors, telling me to get better locks and maybe a security camera. "You're pretty isolated out here," he mentioned. "It's probably just someone passing through, hikers or some homeless folks looking for a warm spot." He almost made it sound reasonable to me, as if it were comforting. Fine. That night, I wedged a chair under the front door handle and then another under the back door, keeping the lights on because I couldn't sleep. I stayed up what felt like forever. Then, at 2:47 a.m., I heard the front door handle turn. It was slow, deliberate, even testing the weight as the chair held its place. The handle released, then I heard footsteps move around the side of the house. They went to the back, where the handle turned there too, slow and just as careful. The chair scraped against the floor, but it held its place. I grabbed my keys and phone and stood in the center of the living room, shaking, knowing I was at the mercy of whatever was out there. The footsteps then moved around to the bedroom window and stopped. Everything went silent, and I waited 5 minutes, then 10. I heard it then, a soft scraping sound that was different than before. It was metal on metal. It was deliberate, methodical. It was the crawl space door. I had checked it before and locked it, but the sound of slow, patient work continued. Someone was trying to get underneath the house. I didn't wait to see if they would succeed. I instantly ran to the front door, shoving the chair aside and getting to my car. The motion light flicked on as I exited the cabin, illuminating nothing but empty yard and trees. I drove with my headlights off until I reached the main road. Then I called 911. The sheriff came out with 3 deputies, searching everything, the house, the crawl space, the surrounding woods, and found that the crawl space lock had been jimmied but not broken. They also found more cigarette butts and footprints that weren't mine. They didn't find anyone, however. I stayed in town that night and then the next. On the 3rd day, I decided to go back with the deputy to collect my things. While packing, I noticed something I had missed before. A small gap in the back wall of the bedroom closet, barely visible behind my hanging clothes. It looked deliberate, as if someone had pried the boards apart just enough to create a space a person could fit in, if they were patient enough, if they didn't mind waiting. The instant I saw that was the moment I left everything behind except essentials I already recovered. That was 3 months ago. I now live in town where there are neighbors, traffic, and light pollution. I get better sleep here for the most part. However, sometimes when it's quiet, late at night, I wonder how long that cabin had been someone else's before I moved in. How many nights I slept while someone stood in my closet just waiting, breathing in the dark. I wonder if they're still there, waiting in the cabin for someone else. Around the time I turned 13, my parents gradually began trusting me with independence. One of the first freedoms I was granted was being home alone. They always picked me up and dropped me off from school, and if neither of them were home, they hired a babysitter, so I was never alone before. One night, my parents went on a date without leaving me with a babysitter for the first time ever. I was excited, as I felt it was long overdue. My friends talked about being home alone all the time, which made me realize I kind of had helicopter parents. Honestly, the first hour was disappointing. Everything was the exact same, only there was nobody in it but me. Despite the lack of authority figures around, I still didn't feel like I could break any rules without getting in trouble. I thought about doing so earlier, but at the moment of truth, I was too scared to. Looking back, I think I was self-enforcing my parents' expectations. Like I literally couldn't comprehend the ramifications of being alone, but I didn't understand any of that at the time. All I felt was this eerie unease. I was at home, yet somehow in unfamiliar territory. Then I started to doubt if I was even alone. As I stood aimlessly in the living room, I saw a blip of movement at the front door, the same crossing of a shadow that comes right before someone enters or knocks, except it was followed by silence. On reflex, I went to my tippy toes, like I had nearly been caught sneaking around past bedtime. I crept up to the door and looked out the side window. I saw the front porch empty, just like the rest of the house, save for a cluster of moss bouncing around the porch light. To get comfortable, I went upstairs to my room. I wanted to close my door, but even though I knew I could, I didn't. I usually wasn't allowed to, and I still wasn't ready to break the rules. Of course, I didn't think it would make a difference since I was home alone. Feeling nervous and needing to do something with my hands, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. I turned to a blank page, wrote the date at the top, then tried to collect my thoughts about being home alone for the first time. I was too anxious to write for what must have been several minutes, but any concentration I might have had was quickly shattered.